Welcome to the Conditions for Recovery podcast. I'm George, a specialist pain physiotherapist. In this podcast, we share stories of hope and improvement from real people who have found a way forward, helping you to counteract narratives of inevitable decline. Today's guest is Virginia McIntyre. After a 2008 workplace injury and subsequent shoulder surgery, Virginia found her life devastated by severe, unrelenting chronic pain. She endured years of isolation, medical skepticism, and misdiagnoses. Eventually, she found a turning point attending a specialist pain management unit. There, she learned to self-manage her condition and discovered a new purpose, ensuring no one has to navigate the complex, invisible struggle of chronic pain alone. Today, Virginia is a globally recognized patient advocate and educator. She is now president and executive director of the People in Pain Network, chair of the Canadian Pain Society People with Lived Experience Committee, co-host of the Action on Pain podcast, and member of the Pain Canada National Advisory Committee. I'm really looking forward to chatting to Virginia today. Thanks so much for joining me.
Such a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invite, George.
Not a bother at all. I'm really pleased to be chatting. So I've obviously given a bit of an introduction, but it'd be really helpful to have a bit more of your perspective of how your journey has been up to this point.
Yeah, I'd love to share. So I guess we'll start at the beginning. And like you had said, it had been a workplace injury that led to a shoulder surgery. So for me, going into the surgery was like, okay, it'd be, you go for the surgery, 6 weeks, you're back to work, you're back to doing everything you used to do as a marathon runner. I played lady soccer, super mom, the whole thing. I had my super cape on and off I was going. In 6 weeks, I'd be back to work. Much to my surprise, when I woke up from this surgery, I had this awful ungodly pain in my back. And it just changed everything for me, because as I would go to the physios and osteopath and massage and anybody I could talk to, I was constantly dismissed and saying, well, the surgery went well. And even the surgeon, the surgery went well. And that was the whole thing. The surgery went well, with nobody even looking at the back. When I would say, here's where the pain is, they go totally back to the shoulder. Surgery went well. So it left me out of work for 3 years. And when you're constantly dismissed and not believed, you start doubting yourself. And so that's where I was. I was doubting myself. I didn't know what was going on. I was constantly in tears. I was hiding out. I became very isolated. Your friends don't connect with you. Your workplace doesn't connect with you. It becomes to a point after that many years, they don't even want you there, and you start getting bullied. And it left to a real dark hole of agony. It took probably about 2.5 years into it that someone had this light bulb moment to send me to a pain specialist. So that's where it became the changing point, because someone sat in front of me and listened. And I was very guarded of what I said, because at this point, no one's going to listen. They're not going to believe you. You're constantly proving yourself. So at this point, I was very, very guarded of what I say. And knowing anything I said was being reported back to my insurer, because they really impact your care. You become guarded, what you share, because if you go to them and say, okay, I've tried this, it didn't work, it now looks like you don't want to try it. You don't want to go back to work. It looks like that you're non-cooperative. Or if they see you out going for a run, a 5-kilometer run, and you're used to being anywhere from a 13 to a 20-kilometer run, but you're fine, you're better, you can go back to work. It's like a surveillance when you have insurance and company over you. So it took this physician many months before I would totally open up with him and share what was happening. But he was very patient and very kind and never once doubted what was happening in my life, and asked me what was happening in my life, which nobody asked before, and never doubted my pain, and was able to guide me down a path of a physiotherapist so I could see and know about pain. But at this point, I'm driving a 3-hour commute. It's a 1.5 hour each way, and it's like there was nothing in my area for pain self-management class, see the physio. So it's exhausting. But on the other end of it, I did get better. It took a while, and then it did take a slow return back to work, but I did get back to work in an accommodated position, but I did. And it's pretty rare for someone to be out of work for almost 3 years and get back to the profession. It's something I really, really fought to get back to.
Absolutely. I think it's interesting because one of the things that really stands out to me is so many of the people that I work with, they have this period in the wilderness where they're telling their story to clinicians, and clinicians are saying, nope, it's not what's happening. And a lot of the time they won't say you are making this up, but they will say something which makes you feel a huge amount of self-doubt secondary to that dismissal. And one of the things that I find really interesting is how many people have to go through that. Why people don't take what the person suffering from pain says at face value and just say, well, actually, maybe there is something more complex going on here, and maybe we need to get you to someone who's more specialized. And there have been attempts in Scotland, where I am, to remedy this with policy which improves access at an earlier point, but I'm not massively convinced that that has had a huge impact on people's journeys. I work with people all the time who have had years and years of going through that roundabout of going to someone for help, not getting the help, being given messages which make them feel worse. And it was a really rubbish couple of years, but somebody noticed that fairly early on. And I wondered what about your situation helped that conversation to happen that meant that you ended up in the right specialist area.
So I wouldn't say someone knows early on. It was about 2 years into the journey before someone did. But what had happened was the surgeon, I'm going back and now seeing this ortho surgeon every 6 weeks. This physio's not working, this not working. Well, he said, try this, come back. He was very kind, but he would say the surgery went well. I can send you for a second opinion. Okay. So I'm off waiting for another surgeon to see me. And that's where it was. And now it was going this hour and a half drive. I live in a rural community to see this other surgeon. And after waiting in his office for about 2 to 3 hours, wait to see him, he's the one who said, I have the thing for you. Go see this pain clinic and they'll do injections in your back and the pain will be all gone. So even though the message was a little not correct, because the pain's not going to go, he did send me down a path to the pain clinic. So yes, it was kudos. He did do that. And that really was the turning point, was him actually acknowledging that maybe there's something more going on.
There's this interesting thing that happens to so many people who have experienced similar journeys to the one that you have, is that if they've had surgery, then the surgeon says, well, the surgery is a success, so this is essentially a you problem, and people feel so lost in that when that happens. And the surgery could have been a success, but we're taking too narrow a view of what health and suffering is when we say, well, actually, nobody can see a problem with the surgery, and so your pain is not any of my business anymore. I'm washing my hands of your situation. And it just feels like it again comes down to, if people are took at face value, I can't speak for Canada at all, although I imagine that it's similar, is there's this distrust in people who report ongoing pain even when they've had what is deemed to be a successful intervention. And it doesn't really make sense. And you have contextualized that both in our previous conversations, and you briefly touched on it before, when you have to appease and perform a specific way of being in pain or to keep the insurance company on side.
Yeah. Being under an insurance company, how many times I was asked, do you like your job? Do you want to go back to work? They're pretty well accusing you of not wanting to go back to work. So that does have an impact on the stigma around it and how people look at you. You're often first looked as a woman, or are you overreacting? Is it really that bad? I'm sure you can work. And then there's the point of, do you really like your job? And that became quite a routine question, which makes you try and improve yourself. Yes, I like my job. I didn't go to university to not my job. I was fighting to go back to my job. You talk about the distrust in healthcare providers and us and our stories and believe in us. To me, it became a distrust in them after a while too. After a couple of years of this, I became very guarded and distrusted them because I was tired of not being believed and being dismissed. You often hear this thing, oh, we're all patients. Well, sure, I was a patient beforehand, and I did work in healthcare. Going in to see a doctor because you have a cold or for your yearly routine is not the same of being this constant patient. And you're seeing between physio, massage, and surgeons, you're in these offices 4 and 5 days a week. That's a job in itself. That's a job. And it is not the same. And even yet to this day, going into hospitals or going to see a new healthcare provider, there's a real pit in my stomach, which I never ever had before. I had to endure the journey. I had to endure but I still get that pit in my stomach. I was fortunate that I did reach a pain doctor who believed me and also believed that I could do things and I could get better before I even believed myself. I lost hope in myself because people get in your head.
I think that's really interesting. There's a couple of things that you've said. The first one being that actually you had lost hope and you had lost confidence and you had to be persuaded, I guess, that capacity for change, that malleability, that possibility of hope was still potentially on the horizon. But also something that you say, which I think resonates with a huge amount of people who live with pain, is the fact that you become so sick of being disappointed and so sick of being dismissed that you completely lose trust in healthcare professionals. And I see this on a near daily basis in the work that I do with people living with pain, is that you actually have to build up that therapeutic alliance, and it's a considerable gap between what that person is expecting. They're often expecting just to be dismissed again. They're often expecting to just be disappointed again. And that is a barrier. And if we got people in earlier, if we recognized that there was something more complex going on earlier, I see this fairly regularly, as when people get put to a pain service, when somebody notices this is something else going on. It's not just that this person is got health anxiety. It's not just this person is a hypochondriac. Actually, there's something else going on and we need some more specialist intervention. The people that I see who get that somewhat early often come with much less distress and much less distrust than the people who have been navigating that journey for years, but it doesn't happen anywhere near enough.
And I wonder, George, after 2-3 months post-surgery, why wasn't I sent to a pain specialist? Why didn't those flags come on? Maybe there was something could be done then, right before I lost trust, before I lost hope, before I lost years of work, lost years of time with my family. Why didn't they see that and have that entrance? Okay, there's something going on. She needs to go see that. Because once you spy on, your pain gets worse and worse and worse. It's harder to come out of it. It takes time. It takes years to come out of this. So why wasn't that even looked at right at the beginning? There needs to be something we can do to prevent her from going down this spiral.
You used the word stigma earlier. Stigma is not just something that people experience on an individual level. It's also baked in institutionally to an awful lot of healthcare practice, and people maybe don't realize that they're treating people in a biased or slightly prejudiced even way, but actually there's still a huge amount of skepticism in healthcare about the validity and about the legitimacy of people who experience pain. You have conversations with people where maybe inadvertently, maybe explicitly sometimes, they reveal, for example, that they don't believe in fibromyalgia. They just think that people are malingering. And that feels cruel. Maybe not cruel, maybe ignorant. It's hard to know exactly what it comes from, because I do believe that the majority of people who work in healthcare at least start down that path because they care about people. It's that the culture potentially grinds down that empathy towards someone's suffering if that suffering doesn't fit within very narrow lens of what is legitimate and what isn't.
It's a couple of things. I think once it's education. They're not taught about chronic pain. I mean, I can remember when I returned back to work and I worked in diagnostic imaging and talking to a friend who was an emerge nurse, and she's, oh my gosh, they're coming in, they're drug seeking. And I'm like, are you kidding me? One, I can't believe you said that to me. And two, I didn't often share I was living with pain at that point. It's like, do you think maybe we're serving them wrong? They're coming here because we're not treating their pain well. We're not giving them what we need. And I think it is education. They don't know what to do. And mine all started in 2008. And now I run peer support groups and I listen to people. Mostly people come to our group are Canadians, but we do get people from out of Canada. And it's the same story. They're not believed. They can't get services. There's no accessibility to resources to how to live with pain. They're coming in our waiting areas and they're crying. We're just like, oh my gosh. And they're like, it is so nice for someone just to believe me. Is it that hard to sit in front of someone and just believe them? And not just say the words, because that becomes the thing now. Tell them you believe them. Walk the talk. Sit there, listen, really believe them. So is it really that hard to be in the room with them and say, yeah, this sucks. What's to do? And maybe I don't know what to do. But maybe there's something I can, or I can sit here and listen to you. Maybe we can look at this together. because I think there's a huge lack of education around chronic pain, long-term pain, huge lack.
And I think one of the things that's interesting is I'm obviously in the UK, and I'm now having conversations with people in Canada, in America, in Australia, and you see the same things across the Western world over and over again. The way that we practice contemporary healthcare seems to really be missing a trick with this huge group of people. And I think what you said before about actually walking the walk rather than talking the talk, there is something beyond just paying lip service to I believe you. You have to actually make someone feel heard and feel understood and feel that you have some sort of a plan that you can actually help them, rather than just be another disappointment, rather than be just another learn to live with it, rather than be just another ineffective prescription. You can't just say you believe someone, they have to feel believed. And something that you said before about feeling really guarded and it taking a number of sessions with this person. Maybe in the first session they said the sorts of things that you needed to hear, but it took time to get to that point, or maybe it took time for them to say what you needed to hear. But ultimately we're causing a lot of these problems. And as you say, if someone had said after 3 months, this isn't following the normal course, we need to do something different here, then that could have massively changed your trajectory. And as you said, could have changed your ability to participate in family life, ability to participate in valued activity, ability to participate in employment. And the impression that I've got from our conversations is that your work was a big part of your identity. And so actually we're really failing people by not doing this.
True. It led to me after 2 years going into another surgery, just to see what's going on. There was nothing going on. I had pain. But yeah, these are causing problems. These are leaving people in a real poor situation. Why can't we do better? I don't think it's a big ask. And why aren't the policymakers part of it? It takes everybody. It's not just the universities. It's the policymakers. It's the clinics. It takes everybody, because we can't put all the pain care in our big cities and our big hospitals. It has to be accessible everywhere. And in terms people can understand, it has to be everywhere for people. In Canada, I'm seeing a couple of provinces starting to step up, but just starting to do some stuff. So it'll be interesting over the next 5 years where they go. But it truly breaks my heart when I hear anybody going through what I went through. And then when I hear that our youth, for me, it was a block in my identity. Now what? Now where am I going to go? I can't run marathons. I can't play soccer. So here's all my friends gone. Because that's your friend network, this is what you do. I wasn't working for a while till I got back, but you go to work and you come home, become very isolated. So it changes so much on us. But like I was getting at, what about the youth who are trying to figure out who they are? We learn as teenagers how to connect and how to be. So what about them? And they're told they're just trying to avoid school. Like I was told, I'm trying to avoid work. It's the same thing. And this is heartbreaking when you see these things are going on. And I'd rather sit with a physician to say, I don't know, Virginia, what's going on, than not to believe me and say that I was trying to avoid work or I was making it up or that sort of thing.
I think that ambiguity is such a important part of healthcare, is we don't actually know everything, and there are plenty of things which are still pretty mysterious when it comes to the way that people's bodies work and the way that suffering happens. And there is lots of interesting conversations happening around this, and there's lots of research happening about this, but it's not really translating into practice. And I think that what you said before about the fact that actually we're seeing huge numbers of people, including younger people, it feels like there's more younger people, and whether that's something to do with the fact that it's just becoming more apparent or whether it's because there is an actual increase, I have no idea. But you're right, when you are a adult who has something which puts a pause on your life, then you have an idea of what to get back to, you have an idea of where you want to be. Whereas when you're still in those incredibly formative years trying to figure things out, to have that put on hold and to then also be told that you're making it up or that you're getting some sort of secondary gain out of it, it potentially sets you on a lifelong path. And in some cases it won't. In some cases people will get the validation that they need and will get the support that they need. But for a huge amount of people, it is a downward spiral.
I think so. It leaves triggers. Like, even though I consider myself as doing very well, I've got back, built confidence in myself, but it's just triggers. When I look at how I was treated, there are definitely triggers, but I know how to handle these. So it does leave a lasting print on your life. It truly does.
Absolutely. As you said, you went to the pain clinic and then you saw this doctor who,
Yes.
as you said, it took some time to build some trust. It took some time to build that relationship. But when did you start to feel, actually, I can see a different route here? I can see that things could potentially improve.
That was pretty slow going. And I don't know, I think it was a real slow going. So with the knowledge I learned, even when I got back to work and I was still seeing him, it gave me that support. And the physiotherapist I was seeing in the city was very supportive. So I started seeing changes, but I was still just one foot in front of the other. Do you know what I mean? I wasn't really living. I got back to work. I'm going to work. I'm coming home. I'm going to the city. At that point, it was every 5 or 6 weeks for treatment. I'm still on medications. It's slow moving, but it took me years. I think when I really pivoted, and I look back now, was 2017. The Canadian Pain Society was here in our community, and I never thought about going to these conferences, and I went. They had a patient scholarship again. I had to drive to the city an hour and a half and went. And what they did was a really cool thing. They did a workshop for those with lived experience there on sharing your stories. So as I sat around this and we learned to share stories, they matched us up with people. So I got matched up with this young girl. At this time was only in her early 20s, and I told her my story. And she told me her story. And I look at my story being, at this point, very sad, the things I had to endure and all that. So we stopped. And then she had to repeat my story back to me, to this group of people. And she said, Virginia is what I want to be. She's a career woman who's learning to live with her pain and moving forward. That's who I aspire to be. And I'm there, oh my God, it wasn't what I thought of myself.
Mm-hmm.
And it made me think, you know what? I am doing okay. And it was just her saying this to me, someone I didn't even know. I know her now. And I said that to her years later. We're at a conference and I said, do you remember saying this to me? I was like, wow. Yeah. So at that point, I started sharing my stories and realized that in the room, everybody is really still struggling.
Mm-hmm.
This is horrible. So then I decided to open up with a friend who I just met at that when I come back into my area about opening up peer support. What can we do? Because people are not getting services, they're not getting access to care, they're not getting education, they're not being believed. So we opened up our first peer support, People in Pain Network peer support locally. And my ideals, I'm giving back. I really went with that attitude, right? I gained more from that, George, than I can ever believe. And over the years, I've gained more and more by these groups and being in the room with these guys and learning how they're pivoting, how they're doing things, how they're believing each other, how they're supporting each other, how they're in the same room and someone will say something. You got this other person and they'll say, well, that's not what I see. I just see that you really had a productive day. You did this and this. And they're so good to each other and they're so positive. And I keep learning from them how we're taking this evidence. And all our sessions have an education component, right? But we take this evidence and it's very unique because we're putting it into practice. And then we grew and our facilitators have extensive training and everybody's able to navigate these groups and get access. And we're still hearing people are alone, don't have care. But we're also hearing I'm in a space that is a home base, a community, a place where I'm believed. And for me, that became the first place I truly took my mask off and shared I was living with chronic pain. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until then, even my own family started understanding what I was going through because I hid it. Because remember, I was super mom. I wore a cape. When I lost my cape, I was lost. So when I started sharing my stories with others and they started learning and reading some articles, the support I got around me from my family without even asking. But I never asked them before to help me, and maybe I should have. But a real huge change for me and a real pivot and a real confidence builder that I could go now and talk in front of people. I could sit with other people. I can share. So I would say over those couple of years, it was a really big change for me.
There's a few things in that. So the first one is this roll of time, the fact that actually there are no quick fixes and people's whole expectations of healthcare often has to be slightly reconceptualized because what they are hoping for is that the expert clinician is going to offer them something that they can't do for themselves. And I think people get really stuck in that, and it's not their fault that they're stuck in it. They have grown up potentially for the entire of their life with the healthcare system doing that. What you said before about when you go to the doctor with a cough. I talk to people all the time about the chest infection model being the model that most people think of as healthcare. You go, you describe your symptoms, they give you a simple solution because they've heard it a million times before, and 9 times out of 10 you get better. And then if you don't get better, then they give you a different one and you will get better. That's what usually happens when people's experience of healthcare. The same thing happens with lots of people. If they break a bone, you go and you potentially have surgery, or you get it in a cast. And then at the end of that process, you're all right. It is healed, the end. Where people really struggle is with that change in expectation that actually a lot of this is probably going to come down to me, and there's a lot of time in it. And actually, I often say to people that my role clinically is to provide support and guidance and be a sounding board. I know the sorts of things that might help, and I've assessed the sort of things that they're saying that might help, but actually they're doing all the work because I'm often not seeing them for 3 months at a time. And I might make a suggestion of the work, but it's often more to do with how they bring out the things. It's about them figuring the things out. So I think that was really important. The other things were, one, participation and purpose seem to be a recurrent theme in the people that I have conversations with, is one, the role of community and the role of having people who genuinely understand, and the role of having people who can provide that peer suggestion, but also something really interesting about how we talk to ourselves versus what other people see. You reflecting on sharing your story and then it being shared back by someone, and you feeling my story is a sad story, and it's not a sad story, but somebody else sees that and goes, God, I wish I could be you. God, I wish I could be in your position. God, I aspire to be you. I aspire to be like you. People really struggle to see those changes themselves, and that they can really benefit from being heard by people and having that reflected back to them. And it's something that I encounter as a barrier over and over again, is a lot of people, even when they're exceptionally isolated, even when they're expressing that they're exceptionally isolated, the second that you say, well, hang on a minute, maybe there's a role here for community, maybe there's a role for broadening participation in your social life, maybe there's a role for your support network, they poo-poo it. They go, oh no, that's not for me, I could never do that. And there are some valid concerns. You see Facebook groups all of the time, which are just people asking each other, is this a symptom of this? Does this often complete scam treatment help anyone? And then people saying everything's terrible. And it's one of the reasons that I started this podcast, is because there are an awful lot of voices all over the world saying you can live well with this. And that isn't the message that I see when I look at social media for people with pain. When people are in person, they're more reasonable. You're not behind the screen. You're not potentially anonymous. A huge amount of the most awful posts that I see on Facebook support groups are from people who don't have a username, who don't have a picture. And it just perpetuates this spiral of hopelessness and this spiral of deterioration, and this idea that inevitable decline is the only thing that you can experience.
You hit on a few things. Sometimes you're only there every 3 months to see a patient. Well, that's support. That support, it means that we're not alone, which is extremely, extremely important. And that's where the community support comes in. I think people need to be mindful, and they need to be careful what communities they're aligning with. And I can understand why some clinicians may be hesitant to send people to peer support, and I think they need to check it out. And I'll say that to people, check out where you're going. Are the facilitators trained? What kind of education you often? Are you talking medication? We don't talk medications. That's a conversation with you and your healthcare provider. We're about pain self-management, but we will talk about, okay, you have a new medication. We don't badmouth people because they're on a medication. They have their role or an intervention. It's like, what can you do? Okay, you're on the new medication. Can you go for a walk? Are you able to get out of the house? What can you do now? So it's about those changes and those positive changes. But I think it's very important for any clinician or any person who's looking at peer support to look into how the group is run. We are partners in Canada with Pain Canada, and we partner with Pain BC, AQDC. So there's a couple of groups that we ensure that we're doing the same thing. We're the same messages, that there's structure to the group. Structures make you understand what to expect and what our facilitators expect. Our facilitators go through extensive training. They go through a 5-week extensive training, 1 day a week, with modulars plus in-person training plus debriefs. And these things are important. And any of the partners that we have aligned with are doing the same thing. And I would never send someone to peer support if I didn't check out what are they doing and what messages are they giving to, because I think that's very important. We don't want to set people back. We want to listen to people when we want to be there, and people want to be heard and valued and be believed, and they want education that's in layman's terms, stuff they can use, stuff that's practical. So to look at these organizations, and the organization is not sharing these things, that may raise flags right there.
There's something about singing from the same hymn sheet. The hymn sheet has to be pretty complex and pretty nuanced, but at the same time, there are messages which hurt and there are messages that help in pain management, and a huge amount of the messages that you see are messages that hurt at the moment. One of the things that's also interesting, when there's that barrier, when there's that skepticism, there's something in pain management about being open to opportunities, and going along to something is not committing you for life. If you don't like it, you don't have to go again. But it's that interesting combination of factors which I think possibly leads to people going, nope, I am closed off to that as an idea. And it's because they've been burnt so many times before, I'm sure.
People living with pain have been. They've been hurt. They have, and they don't want to. And we'll say to people, come to group, come once, come now, come 2 months down the road, come all of them, whatever you want. We got people who've been coming for years. We got people who drop in depending on their schedules. I'll come to the morning group or the evening group depending on their work schedules. It is different. We have one lady who gets home and just gets in the door. So she's sitting down with her supper, eating and talking to us at the same time. That's fine. It's different for everybody, and there is no commitment. These things are about you. They're about us, how we're going to live, how we're going to manage, and what best works for us. And peer support may not work best for people. They may not want to hear other people's stories because it may set triggers off to them. I know our young adults group do things a little bit different because they want tips on how to do stuff. They don't want the education point. They want to get right down to the tips because they're pretty savvy on the computers. It literally is different for everybody what they want. And if it's not your thing, get out. But I'm telling people, try it. No different than telling people try mindfulness. Like when people told me mindfulness will work, I'm like, I'm not doing that. Well, I do it all the time now. It works, but don't just try it once. Try these things, couple them, whatever in your self-management toolkit that works. And I do believe in supported self-management, having some healthcare provider or someone who'll walk beside you. And if that's not your person, you don't need to stay with them. Get someone that you connect with.
I totally agree, because people often are referred to as having low self-efficacy and being passive copers. And I always think that that is incredibly rich that people are being called that, when actually almost all of our systems create that. They make the healthcare professional into the infallible expert, and they're the one with the solution. And so when somebody comes into a service and is told, you need to do this thing, and they go, well, I've got some pretty big concerns about that. You can't just say, well, okay, you're non-adherent, you're non-compliant, go away. When I was a student, we were told two things which I think directly fit into this. And I went to a phenomenally innovative university. A huge amount of what we studied was health psychology. A huge amount of what we studied is person-centeredness. And I have conversations with people who I maybe work with now who study somewhere else who didn't get anywhere near the level that I did. So I think my university did a huge amount of good in the training that they did. But two things that stuck with me, and I don't know whether they were necessarily explicitly said, but they were definitely implied, was one, you need to be this slightly detached authority. There's being compassionate, but also you need to make sure that they believe that you are competent and you know what you're doing. And I think you can build that trust in lots of different ways. It doesn't necessarily mean that you are the infallible expert. The second one was that you had to be able to work with all people, no matter what, all of the time. And I think that that's actually a really damaging idea. I think that actually there are examples that I have had in my career where actually somebody that I work with is much better suited to someone for whatever reason. And I think that the idea that we must be the right person for everyone is a bad one. And I think there should be more of what you just said. People should be able to say, actually, this isn't working for me. I'd like to go and try something else. I'd like to go and try someone else. Because where things go so wrong, you see people saying fairly regularly, I've tried physio, it doesn't work for me. Or I've tried mindfulness and it doesn't work for me. Both physio and mindfulness are not single unified things. I often talk to people about deliberate relaxation rather than mindfulness because there's an awful lot of people who have that immediate aversion to it that you mentioned before. And so I try and get around it. But for some people, it's kind of obvious that actually they might really benefit from sitting down and doing some meditating, that they maybe are open to that. And so you can just say, why don't you try doing some of that? Whereas with other people, it's about being imaginative with it. And I think where we go wrong is this protocolization of mindfulness is this. You see it in lots of psychological approaches. We're doing the leaves on the stream exercise. And if that doesn't work for you, well, I've given you mindfulness exercises and you've not adhered to them. Well, actually, we need more flexibility and we need more imagination in the approach that we take to people, because people are individuals with all sorts of influences which are impacting how they respond to things.
Yeah, no, that's it. I think right there, people are individuals and we're all unique in our way and how they work. And we talk about mindfulness. If you do it for 60 seconds, that's fine. It doesn't have to be sit there. I used to think you have to sit there for 15 or 20 minutes or whatever. There's different ways, but people are unique and people are individuals, and people come to the table with different stories and different things that help them and think for things that have hurt their journey. So everybody needs to be looked at uniquely as an individual. And that I think really is key, to look as unique and see what works for us. When I started seeing the physiotherapist in the city, she knew I was a marathon runner, and everybody else was like, oh, you're running 5 kilometers. You can work. And she's like, my daughter's a marathon runner. She said, you guys don't think. I'm like sitting there like, what? You don't. You think you have to go out and run 8-10 kilometers. You don't. And you're running too much. Bring it back. You've got to stop this. Everybody looks at, we don't exercise. We don't move. What's holding back? Where I was exercising too much. They neglected to look at me and what I was doing and what I needed to do, and stop painting us all with the same brush, because we're all different. And for different reasons, we respond the way we respond. It was nice to see someone just look at me for who I was and see what was best going to benefit me, and look what I was doing and not judge me.
A huge number of people in the world can't run 5 kilometers, and yet just having some arbitrary idea of, well, if you can run 5K, is that not good enough? Well, no, it's not good enough, because this is where I was. This is what I was doing. Distance running is different.
Oh, yeah.
It is different. People are scratching a different itch when they run longer distances than they are scratching when they run shorter distances. And so the idea that, well, you're good enough, actually only one person gets to decide whether they're good enough, and that's the person who's living with these things. And yet we sit people down that we've potentially never met before, that we potentially see a couple of times a year. We arbitrate what their expectations and hopes should be. And I think there is a really important element of expectation management, but we use overly fatalist language in healthcare all the time. We give people prognoses which we don't really have any strong backing for, and we tell people that they should limit themselves all the time based on tiny snapshots into their lives.
I think it's the correct key word, tiny snapshots, because that's all it is. But I think you said something interesting in terms of we're good enough. And I think at some point when we're living with pain, I don't run marathons anymore, and I don't play aggressive lady soccer anymore. But at some point we have to realize too, we're good enough. We're okay that we live with pain. We're okay that I can't run marathons, or that it takes me longer to do something, or it's okay if I have to take my afternoon breaks. It's that kindness to ourselves and recognizing what I can do. And I think there's a lot in that we need to realize. You can work up to other stuff. My previous life is behind me, but that doesn't mean this life I have now isn't awesome, because it is awesome. Because I tell you, in 2008, 2009, I would never be able to get on the floor and play with my grandchildren for years. I lost years of my girls' lives, but now I can be there with my grandchildren and spend a day with them. I may have to come home the next day and rest for the day, as they're all little, but I can do it. Because someone stood beside me and I learned, and someone took time and believed in me and helped me believe in myself again and supported me throughout this. And the peer support has been huge. May have lost a lot of friends, but I've built a lot of connections with the peer support and in the pain community with all the organizations that I'm with. The people that are living with pain are some of the kindest and most compassionate people you'll ever come across, because they know what it's like. And they know if you say you're going to be there and join them for coffee or something, and something happens at the last minute, they know, which you often didn't do with other people. You wouldn't want to take the chance. It's realizing really how full our cup is. And I'm lucky I've gotten there. I still have pain. It's not near as bad as it was. I still have a great pain physician. I have a great family. I have time. I have developed some really nice friends and people that I can share with. So I consider myself very fortunate.
There's a couple of things that I would like to revisit. So the first one is what you mentioned before about self-kindness, because the expectation thing is interesting. Too much of pain management is focused on expectation management. It's just, you need to learn to live with this. You need to get on with your life as it is and just accept the situation as it is. But I do think that actually self-compassion and flexible expectation of oneself are hugely important, because people are often limited by pain, and people do often have to change what they perceive that they can do and change how they navigate the world. And that could be a thing that happens for a really long time. Very few people become fully resolved, fully cured of their pain. People are often living well with their pain. The challenge is that when we try and manage someone else's expectations when they're not in a place to do that, that's when that message can be tricky. But when someone is having flexible expectations themselves, being self-compassionate, then they can begin going, well, hang on a minute, how can I open up my world? And what can I do to fill my cup, as you say? And then the other thing is that actually the conditions for recovery as a name is because I see an awful lot of the time people who have conditions that seem to lead to them improving more or at a faster rate. And I also see people who have lots of barriers, which I would call the conditions for chronicity. And some of those things, like having a good support network, like having a good family, like having support from understanding, validating, compassionate clinicians, those things are really important. But also that changing your perceptions of yourself, being engaged with the community, all of those things, because one might go to a peer support group and they're not necessarily making friends with people. They might make friends with some people, but they're still getting a huge amount of compassion, and they're still getting a huge amount of recognition and relatability. They're still potentially picking up all of that good stuff as well. And one of the things that I did want to revisit is, you mentioned before about that underlying idea that actually this is, as a woman, you overreacting, and the fact that a huge number of people are experiencing this medical misogyny. What your thoughts are on how that improves?
Well, it is that you're overreacting, or is it really that bad? That's kind of how it was put off me. Is it really that bad? I mean, it's doubt. You're doubting us. Is it really that bad? Oh my gosh. Well, then you're given that number scale, 1 to 10. Well, maybe it is just a 5. I don't know. It's a 6, and then you start doubting yourself, but it's there all the time. And I don't even know what you say to that, because yeah, it is really that bad. And no, I'm not overreacting. And when you're in that much pain, I wish I had said to them, no, this is real. No, I'm not overreacting. It is this bad. And take those damn scales, pain scales, and throw them out the window.
I agree.
Yeah.
Definitely. I don't understand how we think we can objectively measure someone's subjective suffering. We should just take them at face value. I am suffering. There you go. Okay, what can we do to help?
And how's it impacting you? And how's it impacting your function? And it was funny because when you're going and you're in that 6-week check with the insurance company, and every 6 weeks, let's do some little test. And okay, you can carry this box from here to across the room 3 times. Oh, you can go back to work. So they send you back to work, and you last about 3 hours because nobody addresses the pain, and you're out again. And their way of assessing things for chronic pain is really, really strange. Really strange.
I don't know about in Canada, but what job involves carrying an empty cardboard box 3 times across a room? Do you get paid a full-time salary for that? Is it compatible? Does it come with good benefits? But in the UK, there's 2 things. The first one is we assess all of these completely meaningless, completely non-transferable things to work as whether somebody can or can't go to work, and whether someone does or does not qualify for support from welfare. And this came up on a previous episode of the podcast. We also ignore all of the guidance. We ignore the fact if someone comes in and they say, actually, I'm not really taking any medication for pain because it isn't working. Then they go, pain's not real. This person's faking. And it's like, well, hang on a minute. The clinical guidelines say that actually very little of this stuff helps people and that it does help some people, but actually that people being on 40 different tablets a day is probably not a good thing for most people, and there's complexity and nuance to that. The other thing is that people regularly get punished for trying to do the things that help. So if you're trying to take a graded approach to exercise, then somebody could potentially tell on you for pretending that you're disabled when actually you're trying to re-participate in life, when you're trying to get some of your identity back, when you're trying to build your tolerance for activity. And so I imagine that the insurance system probably actually is keeping people in this disabled state because you either are or you're not okay, rather than this much more complex middle ground where you're trying your best to improve.
I think you're right there. I mean, you shouldn't have to hide out because you're trying to exercise, and because you can go for a walk around the loop doesn't mean you can go back to work, especially when you talk about our workplace insurance companies. What about part-time disability? Who says I can't work part-time and with my pain? But it is that all or nothing thing, and people hide out. People are afraid to go out because they're watching them instead of getting out there and going for a walk and feeling better, because they're more likely to get back to work if they get out there and if they go for a walk, even if it's a little walk around the loop, and get some fresh air and talk to a friend and not feel like someone's hovering over there and watching. People don't make up their pain. People don't make this stuff up. You can't.
I agree. Is there anything else that you haven't said? You've said some really helpful and insightful things about both your journey and also things that can help other people. But is there anything that you haven't said that you feel you'd really like to say?
Well, I suppose I talked a lot about peer support, and I always like to get that plug in there to check out the People in Pain Network and see what they're doing and check out peer support, but really check it out before you go. One thing I'd like to say to people who are living with pain, be brave. Be brave. People are going to believe you. If they don't believe you, they don't matter. Go find your community. Go find the people who believe you, because they're out there. I mean, you can remember 20% of our population is living with pain. It's higher in our veterans community, higher in other communities than our tradespeople. So I'd say it's a lot more than 20%, because I say a lot of people don't share they're living with pain. So they're out there. So be brave. Share your stories. Our stories are important. Our stories are going to bring awareness. They're going to get rid of this stigma. Healthcare providers, listen to the stories. Sit and listen. Really listen. And listen to the unspoken words. Look at your patient. Listen to the unspoken words. Be there and be there for them, even if you don't know.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for talking to me today. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Such a pleasure to be here and get to know you, George.
Great. If what Virginia has shared today has resonated and you'd like to connect, I'll leave details in the show notes. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please like and subscribe. This is the Conditions for Recovery podcast. I'll see you in the next one. And thanks again, Virginia.